All right, good morning, everyone. We are so excited that you are here with us. You may see that our lovely Madam President Shawn Hester was just on and she just disappeared. We are all in our buildings, right? And she's in her building and they're having some internet trouble. So she'll come back on in a minute. I know that she has some important readings that she wants to share as president of GSCA. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jennifer Diaz. I am the GSCA advocacy chair this year. And you see on the screen the lovely faces of my partners in the advocacy committee. We are very excited to see all of you here. It was very exciting to see our numbers go up as to folks that were going to attend and be interested in being involved in advocacy. So we're so excited you're here. One thing we would like to ask, just some Zoom etiquette, is go ahead and mute yourself. And you do not have to have your video on right now. For most of this presentation, you're going to see our faces and then the faces of some other folks as well as we move through. So at the very end, we'll want to make sure everybody has their cameras on if you want to, so that we can see folks at the end for a question and answer portion. But just make sure for now that you're muted, just good Zoom etiquette, right? So I see that our president is back on again. So Dr. Hester, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, GSCA and school counselors of Georgia. I apologize. Somehow we are having internet issues, so I may go down again, guys. So, but we have this wonderful team here who will move forward in my absence. So I am Shawn Hester, and I am the proud president of the Georgia School Counselor Association. Thank you to all of the legislators and representatives like Representative Samuel Park and Representative Randy Nix, who have had unwavering support of school counselors in Georgia, and that we have the resources needed to be even more effective while working with students. Thank you to the GSCA leadership team who spend countless hours and infinite dedication to ensuring the voice of school counselors is unified and powerful. Today is a phenomenal day in which we, the school counselors of Georgia, advocate for the profession, and what better place than right there at the Capitol. As we continue to advocate to reduce the school counselor to student ratios and provide more funding for additional school counselors, we stand united to promote our impact on creating opportunities for college and career readiness, building the socially emotional wellness of all students, while also promoting academic success. Today, especially during National School Counseling Week, yay! We take this moment in time to acknowledge the work of school counselors in Georgia and those that advocate fearlessly for the profession. School counseling is the work of the heart and love for the students. School counselors serve every student, every day, in every way. As the 2021-22 GSCA president, I welcome all of you to our School Counselors Day at the Capitol. And next, we will have our legislative updates, including the resolution and School Counseling Week by our amazing advocacy team. You guys have to give it up today for them. They have put this together, and we applaud you guys. I believe in giving flowers while we are all here. We want to applaud Dr. Jennifer Diaz, Dr. Melissa Missy Marsh, and Dr. Gayle Smith for putting together an amazing event in which we all will be better together. Take it over, Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hester. We certainly appreciate that. We know that this week is really important. So first and foremost, happy National School Counseling Week, right? We get to celebrate what we do every day. We get to celebrate each other, and then it's also a good opportunity to educate others about what we do, and sometimes in particular our legislators too, right? So today is part of that. So I've already kind of introduced myself. I'm Dr. Jennifer Diaz, the GSCA advocacy chair. I have been a school counselor for 20 years. I've been doing advocacy work for GSCA for 7, possibly 8 years at this point. and super excited to be involved in today. We were disappointed that we could not do this in person, but everybody I think understands. Normally on a Counselors at the Capitol Day, we would get to go to the Capitol, have some listening sessions and have some learning, and then go over to the rotunda and take some pictures on the stairs, and then go into the galley and be able to listen to our House resolutions and kind of witness, you know, our government in action. And that's always so much fun. But they have specific rules and they're not allowing people to come in and watch, and people aren't able to pull the legislators off the floor because of COVID restrictions. So we just thought, you know what, we're just going to do this virtually. We can all roll with it, right? So I'm going to let my partners introduce themselves really quickly before we get started with our program. Gayle, you want to go next?
I will. Hey guys, this is Gayle, Councillor Smith. How are you? It's so good to see everybody. And Dr. Hester, thank you so much for being here this morning and supporting this event and for all you do for GSCA. It's being president is a labor of love, so thank you. And I also appreciate the introduction as Dr. Gayle Smith. I hang out with doctors, not a doctor, just want a point of clarification, but
Just in case you want to go back and get it, I got you.
if this girl weren't retired now, I would. But yeah, I've been involved in GSCA advocacy for more years than I want to disclose. I am a past president of GSCA, and I love this association. I love working in this space, and especially with this great advocacy team and our executive board and leadership team. So thanks for joining us today. Happy National School Counseling Week. Hope you walk away from this event filled with knowledge and passion to go out and do this work.
Good morning, everyone. So excited to be with you for National School Counseling Week. I am Missy Marsh, and I am the newbie to the advocacy team this year. So excited to be with this amazing group. Thanks, Sean, for the great introduction and just for helping us to put this day together. So excited. For those of you who have never been down to the Capitol, it is an amazing event, and I hope that we'll get to do that in person again. But so glad that you're with us today so that we can really talk about counseling advocacy and see what's going on this year. So I hope that this is very meaningful for you, and just so glad that you took some time out of National School Counseling Week to be with us and talk about school counseling and advocacy. So glad to see all of you.
Yay. Thanks, partners. So our run of show, we've got 2 videos we're going to share with you. Greetings from folks that are really, really important to us. And then Dr. Marsh and Ms. Smith, Gayle, Councillor Smith, we're going to go over a PowerPoint with you about advocacy and really what's going on in legislation, and really how to be more active as a school counselor and also as a citizen, right? And then we're going to talk about something a little bit more specific about getting in touch with representatives that are about issues that are important, because we know there are a whole lot of those right now. And we're going to get into that. But before we jump into that, we're going to do these other things first. So we're going to watch 2 videos, and then we're going to have a guest. Like Dr. Hester said earlier, we have 2 representatives that are going to join us. Samuel Park, he is from the 101st District. He'll be joining us in person so that you'll be able to kind of hear from a legislator and be able to ask some questions as well. And then we do hope that Representative Randy Nix, he'll be able to join us. He is in meetings downtown at the Capitol. And so he told us, he promised us he was going to try to hop on when he had a free moment, because it was important to him. We're not exactly sure when that's going to be. So we're just going to have to kind of keep our eyes open for him, right? So we're going to roll with it. We're going to be flexible. But the first video we want to show you is from our dear friend, Representative Matthew Gambill. He is a state representative out of Cartersville. If you've been around GSCA for any period of time, you'll recognize the name. He was our lobbyist for many years before he went into public service. So we're going to watch his video just of greetings to school counselors and see what he has to share with us. Lisa, you can take it away.
Well, good morning. This is State Representative Matthew Gambill, and I want to welcome you all today to Virtual Counselors on the Hill. I know that we all would have preferred to be in person today, and hopefully we'll be there next year. But I do want to encourage you that your time today participating in this activity and supporting the Georgia School Counselors Association is very important. It's so important that you advocate and make sure that legislators understand that school counselors are no longer guidance counselors, and that we need to continue to fight the good fight on lowering the counselor-student ratio and providing the funding for that, and helping them to understand the scope of your work and how that has greatly increased through the years and what that role is today in the current setting. So I want to thank you for all you do. You have tremendously hard jobs and a lot of responsibility that I value, and I know so many members of the legislature value as well. So continue to advocate, continue to seek to meet your legislators and to provide them with information about the wonderful things that you're working on. And I hope you have a wonderful National School Counseling Week and a wonderful day on the Hill.
Representative Gambill is always so very supportive of us, and he was just as disappointed that we couldn't do this in person as we were. So we really appreciate him and all the work that he has done. If you don't know Representative Gambill, when he was leaving us, we gave him honorary lifetime membership as a member of GSCA because of his years of dedication to our work through his work. So the next video we're going to watch really quick are greetings from our friends at the DOE, from Nicole Webb and Sheila McKeon. They put together a little greeting. They are currently at a conference that was scheduled prior to this being scheduled, that they have to attend as part of their job. So they were also very disappointed they couldn't join us this morning, but they did want to share greetings with us. So we're going to watch Nicole and Sheila.
Hello, my name is Nicole Webb, and I'm the School Counseling and Career Readiness Program Specialist for the Georgia Department of Education.
And my name is Sheila McKeon. I'm the Program Manager for School Counseling and Career Readiness with the Georgia Department of Education.
Sorry we can't join you in person, but we are at the CTAE Winter Conference.
We wanted to take this opportunity, however, to remind you that the School Counseling Board rule was unanimously approved by our state school board in December. The school board rule is now posted live on the Georgia Department of Education website. Stay tuned for information on future trainings about the School Counseling Board rule, comprehensive school counseling programs, and student competencies.
This day and this week is all about advocacy, and advocacy work starts in your building. School counselors believe and promote that every student has the opportunity to achieve in school. So this week, even if you're gathering small bits of data to show to your stakeholders or having an advisory council meeting, we know that you will be advocating for your school counseling program.
Lastly, thank you. Thank you for showing up in what we've heard are unprecedented times. Nicole and I have not been in this position long enough that we've forgotten what it's like to be the boots on the ground. We know the work that you're doing is very important and that you are irreplaceable in your buildings. And we want you to know that we know that and that we appreciate you. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for advocating for professional school counselors in the state of Georgia. May this week bring you lots of joy, lots of opportunity to advocate, and some time to rest too. We hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, wonderful. I love all of their words that they shared with us. And you know, how wonderful is it that we have two really, really strong advocates at the Department of Education talking about what school counselors do. And if you don't know these ladies, you do need to know that they really, truly are some of our very strongest advocates, and they're doing great work every day, making sure that we're able to do what we know is best for students. So I really appreciate them sharing their time. And I love that Sheila said, thank you for showing up. And maybe we need to say that again, and you'll hear that again. Thank you for showing up. We all know, we're in our buildings or we're in special places of work. I don't know if you could have heard just a few moments ago, we had a severe weather drill in our school. I was hoping that you weren't hearing things over the intercom because it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to get out of our buildings. It's very difficult to be able to shut the door and put the Zoom notice on your door and then expect to be able to have some time in your office, because we are so very needed. And I know that we're also very busy. So again, thank you for showing up to be here with us today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Representative Park is going to join us at about 10:30. When he gets on, we are going to just kind of stop and shift and listen to him. But we're going to get started with our presentation that we have. So I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. Gayle, Councillor Smith, I think you can take it away and get us started.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And just before we start this, we can send out the contact information for Matthew Gambill, Sam Parks, for Nicole, for Sheila, any legislator, policymaker that's participated with us today and supported school counselors over the years. I think it's really important for us to thank them for doing that. And we'll send out their contact information. And if you could just, when we're done, or even in the middle of this, drop them a quick thank you note for participating with us today, because this is a really busy time during legislative session. And we just appreciate our champions, and they are truly champions for school counseling. So yeah, today is Counselors at the Capitol. We're counselors in our offices wishing we were at the Capitol. Even though when I woke up this morning, I was really happy that I didn't have to get all dressed up and sit in traffic and travel to the Capitol. But it's still fun being together, even virtually, and celebrating National School Counseling Week and celebrating you. So next slide.
You got it.
Thank you. So this is a slide that the advocacy team shared at fall conference in our advocacy breakout session. And I think it's important just to reemphasize, advocacy is an action, not a position. And yeah, you might be advocacy chair, we might be advocacy chairs, but the advocating is the more important part of what we do, and everybody can advocate. So remember, it's an action we take in our jobs, wherever we are, and especially in support of not only our profession, we support our profession, thereby impacting our children. So that's what we keep in mind. So be who you are, know what you know, do what you do, and share what you know and do. And this collaborative piece is so important. We are all right now involved in a lot of different things. We're of course working. We might be involved in advocacy groups. We might be needing to collaborate each other, sharing what we know so that we can make some really solid, informed decisions about what we need to do next for our profession. So here are the priorities for what have been the priorities for years, and some more current priorities. And of course, in 2013, the counselor ratios were lowered. And believe me, 1 to 450 was lowered. At that time, the middle school ratio was 1 to 624. So they were lowered. They're not 1 to 250 like ASCA recommends, but we will work on that. But right now, we're still focusing on getting those ratios funded. And this might be the year for that to happen. We've begun work on that too. To support the statewide implementation of comprehensive school counseling programming, now we have the mechanism in place with that new board rule to roll comprehensive school counseling programming out statewide. And as you heard Sheila say, there's more information to come about those supports and training in that space. So that's a very good thing and a big thing for us to celebrate this year. And we're still working at a statewide implementation of counselor keys. That's the performance evaluation that is school counseling specific. was developed in 2014. And at last count, we had about 30% of our districts actually using counselor keys to evaluate school counselors. So more to come on that. And then the last one, advocating for the protection of student rights to mental health, social emotional development, school safety and security to benefit the whole child. That's our job. That's why we entered this profession, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And hopefully after today, you'll feel empowered to use your voice to advocate for these protections.
Thanks, Gayle. So a lot of times we are really asked, right? How do I make an impression? How do I make an impact as a school counselor? So just some questions for you to reflect upon, for you really to think about as your role. So first and foremost, do you know who your legislator is? And if not, do you know how to find your legislator? And if not, don't worry, we're going to show you, right? So don't think that you're just sitting there like, no, and how do I handle that? So pause for just a second. Do you know your legislator by name, right? That's one of the things, is really building relationships with your legislator. We know at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. And do you feel comfortable calling your legislator, right? And asking for help? And then in return, can your legislator call you when they have questions about school counseling or specifically about what's happening in education? Because we have to remember, many of these individuals have not worked in education. And then I already answered that last question as I was talking about it. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay.
Thanks. So who are my elected officials? There's a very simple website. This used to be a really complicated process, but not anymore. There's a very simple website that you can go to. So if you are not familiar with this process, go ahead and jot this down, or you're going to have access to the website and to the video. But just www.sos.ga.gov, and it's on the My Voter page. So nice and simple. When you go there, there is a link for where do I vote. So right there where the red arrow is pointing, and you're going to go right there. And then finally, you just fill in your information, right? So who are you, what county are you in, and your date of birth, and submit that information, and you're going to get all of the information that you need in terms of who are your representatives and your legislators. So it is now super, super simple to find out who your representatives are. So in terms of then, how do you make an impact? The first thing that you have to do is show up, right? So you're already here, and that's amazing. And we thank you guys so much for it, but show up, right? And when we have this in person again, please show up again, because then hopefully you'll get to meet some of your representatives. Aside from that, though, seek opportunities and actually introduce yourself. One of the times that I always like to reflect on is we have these great events in Roswell, and our representatives are always there, and that's where I live. And so it's a great opportunity for me to meet my local representatives, because they're always out campaigning and they're always out meeting individuals in the community. And so it's been a great opportunity for me to build relationships with them, and just to have conversations about what do they stand for, what do they know about education, what do they know about school counseling. So take some of those community events to introduce yourself and interact with them in a very social setting where you might be there and they might be there anyways. Attend other events where legislators are scheduled to appear. And when you see your elected officials just kind of casually in the community, like I mentioned, introduce yourself as somebody who's involved with school counseling, and think about what you might want to say to them. And then, of course, whenever GSCA, Sean, our elected president, Laura Ross, whenever they come to call, respond to the call to actions. That is so important. We want to make sure that you all know how to communicate with your legislators. Of course, you can always send a letter, do an email, make a personal phone call. Yes, they still actually will answer the phone. Jennifer's going to share a story about that later with you. Or you can make a personal visit with them. They're not always in their office, so you do want to be careful about that. But when you are sending this kind of correspondence, you want to make sure that you are familiar with the information, right? We can't just send a carbon copy to every single one of the legislators, right? We also need to make sure that it is personalized. So you need to know the actual bill or the issue that you want to discuss with your legislator or your representative, and you need to be well informed. The other thing is, after you make contact with your elected official, follow up, right? Definitely send a thank you. It goes a very, very, very long way, but let other school counselors know so that they can follow up as well, right? So that's important as we move forward with our communication. It's important just to make sure that we are maintaining proper etiquette. And I know most of you know this, but just to sort of reiterate, do not use your school email, right? We need to use our personal email as well as our personal time when we are making these connections. This should not be done during work hours or from work email, and absolutely no chain emails. This has to be personal. You have to connect. And like I said at the beginning, we have to build relationships, because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. And finally, we have to make sure that it is clear and effective communication. Just like you, these individuals at the Capitol have very short and finite amounts of time. So please don't get very lengthy with your communication. Really think about what you want to say and be succinct in your correspondence. Like I mentioned, follow up with them and definitely send a thank you, and then just be so appreciative for any kind of correspondence that you receive at all. And my last piece of advice for each of you, and I'm sure that you've heard this before, but really think about your elevator speech, right? What's your why? Why did you get into school counseling? And how could you describe that or explain that in about just a few seconds, right? The time that it takes to ride an elevator floor. So if you were to get on an elevator floor with a legislator or with a senator, what do you need? What could you ask? What is that why for you, and how could you explain it about comprehensive school counseling program, about our allocations, about the ratios? What is it that you could say in a very quick 30-second down and dirty, right? So really think about that. And this is going to sound silly, but practice that, because if you don't practice it, when you have that opportunity, you might just catch yourself with the cat got your tongue, right? So think about it, practice it, and know what you want to say when you have that opportunity.
Thanks, Missy. All of those things are so important. I was thinking about, with your last slide, you were talking about the time with legislators being, kind of finite, and know where you are, know your audience, know what they're doing. I ran into a legislator that I had been introduced to, and he's now no longer in the House of Representatives. He retired. But he was out at the baseball park where my son was playing baseball. And I saw him, and so I went up to talk to him. He was handing out ice cream because it was in his district. But I actually didn't live in his district. And I have to giggle about it, because as soon as he realized that I didn't live in his district, and he was like, oh, okay. And he wanted to talk to other people. And I understood why. He was trying to get votes, right? And he's not going to get my vote because I don't live in his district. So you do have to understand where you are and what are they trying to do at that time. You know, and he wasn't being rude. He was trying, he had a goal, and I was kind of getting in the way of that goal. Nevertheless, he definitely heard my elevator speech, because in the amount of time that I had him, I wanted to make sure that he heard about school counselors again, because I had already talked to him about that. Oh, yay. I see Representative Park has joined us. I'm so excited to see you. Hello. Good morning. And this is a perfect time because we are just about to switch over. So Lisa, if you can make sure he is one of our people, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see Representative Park a little bit better. There you are. So everyone on the call, this is State Representative Samuel Park. He is from the 101st District. He is a Gwinnetian. I am a Gwinnetian. And so that's kind of how I made the connection with him. But we want to welcome you and say thank you for showing up and sharing greetings with our membership.
So good morning, everyone. Happy National School Counseling Week. Jennifer, thank you so much for inviting me to be with y'all this morning. You know, to all the school counselors who are with us, you know, thank you so much for all of the important work that y'all do to ensure that the next generation has every opportunity to succeed. You know, down under the Gold Dome at the state capitol, you know, y'all may have been hearing of some of the fireworks that have been happening, especially this year. You know, it's been a very challenging legislative session, especially in that this is a political year. But whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, there are good people on both sides of the political aisle. And there are people who want to ensure that our schools are fully funded and that we are investing in our state's most important resource, which is our people. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that y'all may have to the best of my ability. There is a lot going on, so I'll do what I can, but I'll turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
All right, I'm going to unmute myself again. I didn't want any noise coming from outside my door to interfere. So what we would like to do for just a little bit, school counselors out there, if you have questions, we do have a live state representative that you can ask questions of. We would like for you to put it in the chat so that we don't have a bunch of folks speaking up. If you have questions about things that are kind of burning for you, we know that there is legislation that is, you know, is causing some emotional reactions and some passionate reactions, right? We're going to talk to y'all a little bit more about some of the things that we've been working on, but does anybody have any questions for Representative Park about what's going on right now before we kind of jump in with any of our questions? Well, and I tell you what, I don't see any typing, but so folks on the call, the way that I got to know Representative Park, we happened to be downtown working on some advocacy work, and I had heard about Representative Park doing really, really great things out of Gwinnett. And so I saw him walking on the sidewalk and I said, I have to meet him. So I kind of stopped him and I said, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to pounce on you or scare you, but I want to meet you, I want to know you. And he introduced himself to me. We chatted for just a moment. He shared his card. And so the next thing I did was I emailed him and I said, could you talk to our peer leaders? Because I think our student leaders need to hear from our elected leaders. And because of COVID, we did a Zoom session. And my kids got so much out of that. And I haven't actually told you about this, Representative Park. We had 7th and 8th graders in the room and our 8th graders are gone, but our 7th graders who are now 8th graders have talked about that and brought that back up in several of our leadership sessions. So one of the things that you talked about, I think this is important for, you know, our school counselors to remember, representatives are just people. Do you think, would you mind sharing that story about why you got into you know, an elected position?
Sure. So, you know, my experience in Georgia politics, the main lesson I've learned is that our democracy is very much alive and well. In that someone from my background, and I come from humble beginnings, I feel like my story is something only possible in America. My grandparents were refugees from the Korean War. My parents were immigrants whose main focus was to ensure that I had a roof over my head and food on the table. You know, I don't come from a politically connected family. I don't come from a wealthy background, but I care very much about issues. So back in 2014, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it was through that hardship that I learned firsthand the importance of having access to healthcare. That access to healthcare is a matter of life or death. 2012 was the first time that I had ever stepped foot inside the Georgia State Capitol. And, you know, I really fell in love with the legislative process because it was an opportunity for people to use reason and logic to try and figure out solutions to the complex collective challenges that we face. And so after the hardship that my mother experienced, you know, I was asked the question by my pastor, what breaks your heart? Know what that is and do something about it. And for me, that was the understanding that there are more than 500,000 Georgians who did not have access to healthcare, who did not have the same fighting chance that my mother had. And thankfully, she had both Medicare and Medicaid. But you know, having Medicaid in particular gave her that fighting chance, which compelled me to stand and fight to make sure that every Georgian would have access to healthcare. And so, against all odds, you know, I simply talked to thousands of voters, knocked on thousands of doors back in 2016 when I first ran for office. And it was the understanding that, and I represent a very diverse district in the heart of Gwinnett County, representing the cities of Lawrenceville and Sewanee. And talking with, you know, old and young voters, Black, white, Asian, and Hispanic voters, liberal and conservative voters, it was the understanding that we have a lot more in common. With the understanding that a lot of the problems that we face, we have to work together to address. And so it was based on understanding and listening to the challenges that my community was facing and the needs that they had, that I was able to build that coalition to have an opportunity to serve. And so I've been in office now for 6 years, feels like a lifetime, my goodness. And now I'm currently serving as chair of the Gwinnett State House delegation, the second largest and most diverse in the county, continuing to do what I can to first and foremost make sure that every single person who calls Gwinnett home has an opportunity and a seat at the table. Because I think especially in this moment in time, we have to understand that in this country, it is we the people who hold the power. And so each and every one of your voices is extremely important, especially when it comes to all of the issues that we're discussing, whether it's fully funding public education or trying to mitigate harm for some of these controversial education-related bills that have been introduced, where, you know, I've been there for 6 years. This has been by far the most challenging legislative session that I've ever experienced. And so if y'all are feeling somewhat overwhelmed down at the state capitol, all the legislators, I mean, it is a bombardment of information where, you know, bills are flying out of committee. But that's where your voices are so important, right? Making those calls, writing those emails to legislators. I mean, that has an impact, right? Your voices very much do matter when it comes to the legislative process, with the understanding that all of us are going to be up for election this year, and all of us will be held accountable to the people for the actions that we take. So as difficult and as challenging as it may be, you know, persevere, lean in there, and continue to do everything to make sure that your voices are heard. Jennifer, I think
I was muted because I didn't want, nevertheless. What I was saying was, do y'all see why I needed to get to know Representative Park? And why I wanted him to know about school counselors, and you already knew about us. And so I so appreciate that. I saw that Representative Randy Nix has joined us as well. But before we turn it over to you, Representative Nix, does anybody have questions for Representative Park? Anything that you just want to know? And again, if you could put it in the chat, that would be great. Although I hate all the pause times. Gayle, Missy, do y'all have any questions for Representative Park before we turn it over to Representative Nix?
I don't, but thank you so much for being with us, especially during this week, and for sharing so much information. I think that that was just really valuable, and it just tied in perfectly to what we were talking about. So thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. And if I may, real quick, Chairman Nix, always an honor and pleasure to see you. You know, if y'all don't know, Randy Nix, Chairman Nix is the chair of the Ethics Committee. And I very much appreciated his remarks yesterday in ensuring decorum of the House and ensuring dignity, both inside the legislature and outside the legislature. And just wanted to say I truly appreciated your words and certainly took them to heart, especially with you know, acting in a way in which you know, we want to demonstrate and honor those that we respect the most. So thank you for that.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Well, then I think we can turn it over to you. And I was saying representative, I should have been saying Chairman Nix. I apologize for that. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share with us. And Representative Park, you know, I told them that you had a meeting that you were supposed to be at, but it was canceled, so you were able to join us. And we know, Chairman Nix, that you're super busy, and so we don't want to take too much of your time. I want to hand the floor over to you so that you can share any words of greetings to our membership. And I believe we had at least 150 folks registered for this. I haven't seen how many are on the call, but I know that there's quite a bit.
There's 100 now on the call.
Yay.
Well, great. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm sorry it's been kind of hard to narrow down a time and I didn't get the video done, but I know that Gayle knows I've been involved for quite a number of years in terms of the school counselors and the things that you do and how much I appreciate it. I think that your role right now is probably magnified, you know, tenfold with the things that we have going on due to COVID and the issues for our children. I've got two young grandsons in the Troup County school system. I think they've done a marvelous job trying to kind of navigate through the issues. But I know that the counselors and what you do is just totally invaluable. I have not seen anything specifically related to the counselors this year. Of course, you know that, and I'm sure Representative Park talked about this. This kind of is the year of mental health, and there's been a big emphasis on it. One thing that I've told them a number of times, a lot of it seems to be maybe aimed at the adult population a little bit more than our students, but I have tried to remind them that this has been an ongoing issue for even our youngest children, the critical role that y'all play in that. So I don't know specifically of anything that is directed to the counselors. I know we've worked several times trying to reduce the ratios, still working to see those things done. We don't have it where we want to be, but we have brought it down some. I remember I was on the study committee back several years ago when we looked at that. So I don't have a lot else to say. Let me just say I appreciate y'all. I know that you do a fantastic job for us. We can't support you enough. And I think hopefully some other people will see the great role you play and how valuable you are through the pandemic and the extra effort and the contributions you're making. So thank y'all for what you do, and appreciate y'all giving me an opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Chairman Nix. I'm happy you were able to join us today. I appreciate that. Thank you. We are, just a side note, for both of you to know that GSCA will be asking for the full funding of those lower ratios for this session. Randy, I know you're on the Appropriations Committee, right? You're on Education Committee. Okay. We still have the special ed and the gifted ed segments that need some funding, and those funds are in the 2021 budget. And of course, our world flipped upside down and lots of dollars were removed from that. But that's what we're going to, one of the many things that we'll be working on again this year.
Okay. If I'm awake in the morning, it's my understanding that subcommittee meets at 7 o'clock in the morning. So if I'm awake at that time, I'll try to make sure we go over it.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. You want me to call you and wake you so you bring you some Starbucks coffee so you can get there?
Yeah, I'll need something. No, I get up early anyway, but as you know, I commute every day. So in order to be here at 7, I'll have to get up about 5 to get ready to get in, but we'll get here. I'm
Okay.
joking a little bit, but it is an early meeting at 7.
Okay. Thank you for that heads up too.
Well, and I really appreciate what you just shared. You know, I mean, those meetings are at 7 a.m. and you're commuting and you get up at 5 a.m. And I think a lot of people, it's easy to forget that our representatives are normal people just like us and have lives and have jobs. And this is not, you know, something that you do just because it's fun, and you certainly don't do it for the money. You know, for those of you on the call, they get a measly pay for being a state representative for all of the work that goes into it. So we really appreciate that, you know, as human beings, what you say, getting up at 5 a.m. and my heart goes, no way. So we understand and we appreciate that. So thank you so very much. And before y'all hop off, I want to say, you know, and Lisa, we're getting messages that people are getting messages that the meeting's at capacity. I don't know if something can be done about that, but that's fantastic. Our meeting is at capacity. So hopefully, Lisa, if you can do something to make sure folks can hop on, that would be great.
Yeah,
but gentlemen,
I just updated that. Thank you. Sorry about that.
awesome. No, that's all right. That's a good problem to have, right? When we have more people that can join us, that's great. So thank you, Representative Nix, our Chairman Nix, and Representative Park. We really appreciate you. Y'all can go about the rest of your day, and we're going to continue to educate our school counselors about the important work of advocacy and making sure that they know how to get in touch with the folks that are in their districts. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you, Representatives. Jennifer, there was a question in the chat box from Maria Grosvenor.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to work on that. Will that meeting be virtual? Oh, so I'm assuming Chairman Nix, that meeting is about the 7 a.m. meeting, or
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it will be live streamed. You will be able to see it.
Okay.
And you can come in your pajamas. We can't see you, so that's okay. And let me say, it's an honor to be on with Representative Park. I'm kind of glad we hit it at the same time. I appreciate him doing a lot of good work, and I appreciate the way he's doing his thing, and he's always an honor to work with. So Sam, good to see you this morning.
Thank you, sir. Likewise.
That timing could not have been more perfect. So thanks, gentlemen.
All right, I'm gonna click out then, and see you later, Gayle. Always good to see you.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I'm gonna how excited they were able to get on at the same time. We didn't have to stop twice, right? I mean, school counselors, we can be flexible, but that was great. We couldn't have orchestrated that more perfectly. All right. So we are going to jump back in to our presentation. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right, and then let me get to where we were, because it went right back to the beginning. You know, I feel like at this point, we should all be Zoom experts, right? Because we've done so much of it, but then there's always something that happens. And you're like, wait a minute, how do I do that? What do I do for that? So where we were, I think this is really a perfect segue. So I am Dr. Jennifer Diaz. I finished my dissertation in the fall of 2020, which wasn't that long ago, but then it feels like it was forever ago too. And my dissertation study was on public arena advocacy, and public arena meaning outside of the school building when we're trying to make systemic change. What I did for my dissertation was I interviewed school counselors that had been successful in public arena advocacy from all over the country, really truly from California to North Carolina to Minnesota. So multiple people. And so some themes emerged from that research about what the experience is like when you go into this work. You know, I knew a little bit about what my experience had been, but I wanted to be able to share that with more school counselors so that more school counselors could get involved with this type of advocacy work. It is intimidating. It is scary when you first start into it. But kind of like Representative Park said, he went down to the Capitol and that bug bit him of, like you just get excited and you just want to be more involved in that. And that's a piece of it. So it says, you know, I put in there, beyond diplomatic advocacy in your building, which is as important and certainly at times even more important, that you are able to advocate with your principal for your position, for your students, for your families, right? Those things we all know are extremely important. We talk about that a lot in graduate school when we are prepared to be a school counselor. Public arena advocacy is different. It's stepping out of your building, it's stepping out of those four walls to be able to make change for more students than just the ones that are in your building. And so that it's a process, and this is not necessarily a linear process where it's step by step. These are kind of all blended in together. But what emerged from that research was these different themes. The very first one is understanding the legislative learning curve. When you get into the legislative world, there is a lot to figure out. There is a lot that many people just don't understand about how our government works. And to be 100% honest, in my 20s, I didn't understand it. I really wasn't paying much attention to it. But then I started to realize how much of an impact it was making on my career, on my students, and on my life. So there's more than just that cartoon that sings I'm a bill, right? Sometimes it's about learning how to read legislation. Legislation is not written in normal English, so to speak. There's a lot of legalese and a lot of things that you might not understand the way that it's phrased. You have to understand the difference between the Senate and the House of Representatives. You have to understand what the role of the governor is. How do bills get proposed? How do they get, how are they studied? How do they get passed? There's a lot of information there. And if it's not our normal world, then it just feels like you're drinking from the fire hose, right? And then it really comes to building confidence in your ability to be able to stop Representative Park on the sidewalk and say, hey, I'm Jennifer Diaz. I really want to get to know you. I live in Gwinnett. I've heard great things about you. But also having that confidence that you actually can deliver your elevator speech, having practiced that and being confident in what you know. And what you know is school counseling. And knowing that you know school counseling means you can talk about that to people that we might think are bigger than life and really, really important. I say over and over again, these are normal human beings just like us. And they've chosen to serve, and they need to hear from us. And quite honestly, they want to hear from us. But sometimes it really is building the confidence to be able to speak and feel like you're not going to mumble your words and you're not going to put your foot in your mouth and say the wrong thing. You can do it. If you can talk in front of students, you can talk to adults, right? Balancing of roles is something that all of the public arena advocates talked about, which can be challenging when you get into this. It's balancing the role of being a full-time school counselor or whatever role that you have in school counseling right now. Then your roles in your personal life. Maybe you're a mom, maybe you're a wife, maybe you're a girlfriend, maybe you are a scout leader, maybe you are a soccer coach on the side. We all have other things that we have going on in our life that make our lives so rich. And so you have to figure out, how do I balance this and where do I put the time in? Because a lot of advocacy work, public arena level, has to be after school. We cannot use tax dollars to be advocating. So we can't be using our school phones, our school computers. We have to do this on our personal time. Where does it fit? When you need to read bills that have come out, when do you find the time to do that, right? Is it between getting the kids dinner and putting the kids to bed, or is it after you put the kids to bed? Or if you don't have children, is it after something really, another important committee that you're on? So it's balancing that. It's also balancing, understanding when you are speaking to legislators that, are you speaking as a private citizen, or are you speaking as a school counselor from a certain district? Are you speaking from a school counselor as a member of GSCA? And we all have those roles, and we have to figure out, what role am I playing now, and what role is significant to me, and how does this need to be portrayed so that the message is received in the right way, so that then we can see some action on the other end. Building and maintaining relationships. I'll talk a little bit later about a relationship that I have with my local representative, but you all saw right there, Representative Sam Park. When I met him, the first thing I said was, I really want my students to hear from you because I have peer leaders in Gwinnett County and they need to hear from another leader in Gwinnett County. So I had him come and speak to our students. And legislators quite often, they love to speak to kids. Some people are scared of kids, we know that, right? But most legislators are going to want to be able to talk about their leadership journey. And that is something that, that they can do very, very well. And kids want to hear this too. And so that's really how I started my relationship with him. After I had him speak to our student group, I wrote him a very personal letter, a very personal thank you. And I talked about some of the comments that the kids had shared with me after that. And there was one child, he is interested in public service when he gets older. And so I think it was really, really powerful for that student. And so I spoke about that student in my letter with him. And I had his card, I had his cell phone number. So I reached out to him and asked him, you know, do you mind speaking up with the Georgia school counselors? And because of that relationship, he said, yes. I am not his constituent. I'm not somebody that's in his district, but he knows that this work is important. And because I've built that relationship, it's able to move on. You saw Chairman Nix address Gayle. It's because of that relationship that she has built with him. So building and maintaining relationships while you're doing public arena advocacy work is really important, because at some point, that person that is a decision maker may need your feedback and your information and your expert knowledge about school counseling, and they may call you because of the relationship that you have built. So those things are important. The working collectively, you see there's you know, myself, Dr. Marsh, Gayle Smith, Dr. Hester on here. This is not something that we're doing alone. This is not something you do as silos. Public arena advocacy work takes the village. It takes all of us. And currently, because of all of the hullabaloo going on in legislation right now, it's also taking PAGE, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. It's taking Gayle. It's taking the large education groups to really be advocating. So we have to work collectively and make sure that we have, you know, a unified voice. And we talk about that in GSCA, making sure that, you know, the leaders in GSCA and the members, we have one voice and we speak about what's important for students through the lens of school counseling. Then we have to deal with resistance. As you heard, we have been working on our 1 to 450 ratio for years. We got the ratio in legislation in 2013. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gayle, it was 2013. We had most of it was funded. We had a little bit more funded in 2018, and we are still working on that final funding for our special ed and our gifted segments of students. What that would mean is another 500 school counselors for our state. And this is not something that has come easy. We've had some resistance. We've had questions, and legislators have said, well, show us your metrics on how you can, you know, prove that school counseling is effective. And we all know on this call, we don't necessarily keep metrics like that. It's very difficult to get metrics that are just specific to school counseling. So we have to deal with resistance right now. If you are aware of what's going on in legislation, you know that there is a lot of resistance, and there's resistance on all sorts of ends. And so we're dealing with a lot of that right now and figuring out how to make sure that we do this the right way, that we protect the professional identity of school counselors, but that we promote what we need to for our students. And then the last piece, all of the school counselors around the country that I spoke with, all of these leaders talked about how you really do feel like you're getting the opportunity to use your voice for systemic change, for more students than just the kids that are in the classroom when you're doing a lesson, right? We're affecting students all over the state. And quite honestly, because of what Georgia does, many other states follow what we do. And so we're able to say, you know, we've impacted students around the country because of the work that we've done. So it really is kind of like you get bitten by a bug when you get into public arena advocacy, and it's just, ooh, I really like this work, and I really feel like it is meaningful, it is impactful. We know that we make a difference in our schools because of what we do and the looks on our students' faces and the voices of appreciation from our teachers. But when you get into public arena advocacy, you also really have that opportunity to make systemic change across hundreds, if not thousands, more students than you do in your own building. So that's part of, kind of in a nutshell, it's a big nutshell, and I could go on and on about this for a long time. But that's really what this experience is like when you get involved in public arena advocacy. And I will say it starts small. You can't start really, really big, right? You have to start with those building of relationships and getting to know people. We always on our advocacy team are looking for more people to step up that are willing to say and to be involved in this and willing to say, I want to be part of that team that gets together and talks and presents at Councillors at the Capitol, and the folks that kind of are the ones that we know we can call on and present possibly at a public hearing. You heard Chairman Nix talk about, when they're discussing different bills, when they're discussing budget issues, they need to hear from real people that are really doing the work. I'll never forget my first opportunity to speak to a hearing committee, and it was intimidating as a younger school counselor. And all of these representatives were sitting up in podiums and kind of in a half moon shape, and they were all talking about the work of school counselors. So when I got to speak, I said, wow, I really was not aware that y'all sat and talked about my job and what I do. But that part was something that I was like, okay, this is really important. If they don't hear from us, then they're not going to know, and they're not going to get the right information. So we need more folks that are willing to go down to the Capitol and to speak at public hearings. So if this is all something that you're enjoying, we'll come back around to that question at the end. Okay. So we're gonna move on in our presentation. And I'm going to hand it over to Gayle for right now. Oh, Gayle, you're muted too.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for that research. Thank you for focusing on that need as you work towards your doctorate. That's important work, and it's great foundational work for all of us to use. So good job with that, Dr. Diaz. Thanks. It was really helpful for our profession. So I'm going to recap some things that GSCA has done in the most recent years, the last 2 years, and some accomplishments for the association. And then we'll move into current issues and talking about things that are going on now and how we can address those. But as you all can remember, probably in 2019, that when the Governor Kemp released the state budget, the big $5,000 raise was earmarked just for teachers and school counselor. Everyone else was left out of it. And we advocated with a very strong voice to include school counselors. Other groups advocated, social workers, school psychologists, all the people, student support folks. And that was successful. They heard us, that money was added, everyone benefited from that raise. We got half of it, the other half of it, I hope, is in the budget for this year, school counselors included. They didn't make that mistake again. And then there was the one-time pandemic salary supplement. We advocated for the inclusion of that as well. And school counseling also, we were guaranteed inclusion of that 3 weeks of paid parental leave and protection, all of this pandemic related. But because we saw that we were so easily at first excluded from the raise, there might be other places that they would forget to plug us in. We had to be a constant voice there. So all of that was was met with success. And of course, a lifelong, I say lifelong, it feels like my life, but at least 2 decades worth of work to get an updated, revised Board of Education rule, changing our name from guidance counselors to school counseling, or guidance counseling to school counseling, and updating that language to align with the ASCA national model. And there's also the adoption of student competencies. That was a huge success for GSCA. I saw Dawn Mann registered for this event. I don't know if she's on, but it was under her leadership at the DOE that we really started getting traction, get the committees together, working on this rule, and it was just adopted in December. That was 20 years worth of working on it, but 3 really intensive years of going after it and lobbying for it. So good job with that. And we've just recently had 2 resolutions to commemorate National School Counseling Week. And we want to thank again Matt Dumnick and Matthew Gambill for the House resolution at 737, and for Chuck Payne and Brian Strickland for the Senate resolution. They are identical. But you can, if you want to go on to the Georgia General Assembly website and download these to share, to post, or whatever, they're there. House Resolution 737 and Senate Resolution 375. And normally we would be at the Capitol in the chamber as they read these resolutions, and we know they were read and adopted. And you could probably go back into the archives and listen to that part of it. So, but they're there, and we're very thankful for the sponsorship of these resolutions. Last year was a tough year with the budget. We know that, pandemic related. We were wanting that counseling funded added back into the budget. It was there for the 2021 budget, dropped out. We were trying to get it into the 2022 budget. Just not a good year for any additions to the budget, but we did present to Senate Appropriation Committee. We met with Mike Dudgeon, who at that time was the Director of Policy for Lieutenant Governor Duncan. Such a nice man, but he retired from that and moved on into the private sector. We had a face-to-face meeting with Senator Lindsey Tippins. We're just constantly out there, especially for the funding of these lower ratios, to get that done. And because of the budget excess this year, this might be the year. Who knows? And last year, of course, and again, kudos to Lisa and the team at Nardone for the fabulous work they did, and for Jennifer Jones, GSCA president, for a virtual conference and our first ever, and we thought maybe last, but not last, virtual counselors at the Capitol, and pulling that together. We have to say, we have to bring this out again, that we didn't stop just because of a pandemic, that these events are important for our members. And so here we are again, but hopefully next year we'll be back at the Capitol. And last year, to celebrate, I saw Barbara Trudeluck on the call, a top 5 finalist for Ask a Counselor of the Year, that Lindsey Tippins sponsored a resolution to celebrate Barbara. But this advocacy at work is all about keeping us visible in front of legislators. They'll remember us, they know who they are, and then we go to them with the hard topics. We go to them with the hard asks, and they'll listen to us because they know who we are, and they know where our hearts are. They know what our intentions are. So I want to talk briefly about the school ratio funding. And this was a slide we shared at fall conference too. It hasn't changed. This funding has support. First of all, you heard from Randy Nix. Chairman Nix listed this as one of his legislative priorities earlier in the year, was to get this funding through. And so he's on the proper committee. I'm glad that we reminded him so he can speak up about it. There are letters forthcoming. You might be asked to do a call to action, but we know Gayle, the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders, that Page and GAE are all behind this funding, and we'll be lobbying for this funding to be added to the budget and then make it all the way through to the end, to the governor's desk.
Sorry, y'all, I was muted. So I've got to say too, I'm hoping that y'all noticed on the call that, that Chairman Nix and Representative Parker kind of doing their legislative networking thing, right? And they were talking, and I think they're always, taking that opportunity to make sure that they each know who's supporting what. And we didn't let go of the opportunity to make sure that we said we're working on our funding, just to remind you. Nevertheless, other things moving on, you remember when Governor Kemp came on, he had promised that there was going to be a $5,000 raise for our certified educators, and really the word was teachers, but we made sure that we were included in that. And so this year, that last $2,000 is expected to be in the budget for next school year, not for this school year, but it'll go in for next fiscal year. So that's really exciting. The reason for that is because our budget, our state budget, actually is in really, really good shape. That doesn't, for me, I was like, how in the world does that make sense? We're in a pandemic and things are not going well for many folks. But as Gayle and I discussed, inflation is up, which means our tax base is up, and therefore the state is getting more money. So that's how our state is doing okay. That's where the money is. So there is an expected restoration of all of the austerity cuts, and that's what they were calling them, from the pandemic. So again, you see there 60% was restored in 2021. The rest of it is expected to be restored in the budget this year, again, because Georgia is doing very, very well. The full funding for lowered school counseling ratio is signed into law in 2013. So we're kind of trying to ride on that wave of, hey, the budget's in a really, really good place right now. This is the year to add that back in. Of course, we're going to say that every year. We did that last year, but this year we have a better chance because the budget is in such better shape right now. Okay. So this is where we're going to get into legislation and topics of concern that we know that folks are worried about, right? If you've been paying any attention to any news outlet, you have heard about legislation that is being dropped. The ones that are of most concern to us, as well to all of the other large educational groups, the educational interest groups, are the bills, and unfortunately there are so many of them that they're now just being categorized and put into lumps, right? So of course we have the anti-CRT bills. The largest one and the most specific one that was dropped was House Bill 888. We have multiples that are aligning in there. We have censorship bills. That is really related to what's going on in terms of books and media that is available for students, concerning multiple areas that may end up affecting our students. And then language in the parental rights bills. These three areas of legislation that have been dropped are what we're watching. GSCA right now, we are working on our response to that with our executive board and with our leadership team as well, because we know that our membership has very strong opinions and very strong reactions to this. So, if you're sitting there thinking, well, yeah, you're not alone. In GSCA, we are working on our responses to this. The other buzzwords that are out and about with legislation and speculation that this is being brought in is the social emotional learning and SEL. And many of you may know, CRT and SEL have been kind of lumped together with many of the groups that have been saying we don't want that in our schools. And it's kind of questioning how is SEL in the same bucket as CRT? And there's some quandary about that. We're not exactly sure. Suspicions are that that there was some anti-SEL movement ahead of this anti-CRT movement, and it really is about parents wanting the right to be able to be the parents. But it's concerning to school counselors because a good bit of what we do is working on the social and emotional development of our students. And in fact, that is a core piece of what ASCA promotes for school counselors to work in that area. So we are watching this. We are keeping an eye on what is going on, and we are preparing our responses. As of yet, we don't want you to be confused. As of yet, there aren't any bills that specifically state anything about social emotional learning or social emotional development. But those are things that we are watching for. Move on to the next slide. What you can do as a school counselor and as a citizen, right? And remember when I was talking about the legislator that I ran into at the baseball field? He's a legislator, but I am not his constituent. So I can speak as a school counselor. I can speak as a school counselor as part of GSCA, the advocacy team. I also can get to speak as a citizen. So it's important that, particularly now in this year, that we read that legislation. And we wrote in here, attempt to understand the legislation. And we kind of thought about that word, attempt. We don't want to insult anybody to say you're not going to be able to understand it. But quite honestly, when we read it, it's like, wait a minute, I need to read back through this and I need to take it line by line. And things in legislation, when it's proposed, you'll see a lot of words. Some of them have lines through them. And that's because it was already legislation, but they're changing things. So it is very difficult to be able to follow these sometimes. If you have read something and you don't understand, you can, you can Google and you can find other sources of information, but certainly you can get in touch with us and we can kind of help you. Granted, when we first read these, sometimes we're asking the same questions. What is this actually saying? And what does this actually mean? So don't feel like that you just can't. We have a difficult time with that as well. Network with other professionals, network with other school counselors. Make sure that you are connected with other school counselors that aren't in your building and possibly not in your district. Best way to do that, of course, is to be a member of GSCA and to network within GSCA. We have a wonderful network of support that you can lean on. But there are other interest groups that you can get involved in. We can't promote any of these other interest groups because we are GSCA. But other groups that you might want to join, of course, you can start with your local PTA, and the national PTA has opinions and responses to legislation. We have PAGE, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. We have the GAE, there is the NAE. And I wrote down some other ones that you might not have heard about. There is one called Fund Georgia's Future that is looking into legislation that will affect what's going on in schools. The Georgia Education Climate Coalition, the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute is looking into these. The Georgia Coalition for Public Education, Public Education Matters, the Georgia Action Fund. So there are many out there that are also speaking and also working on responses or responding that you can be involved in, again, as a school counselor, as a professional, and then as a citizen as well. Because this time, if there ever was a time for us to be involved as citizens, it is now. And then don't back away, stay in it, right? And then contact your legislators about your concerns. So again, that piece where Dr. Marsh talked about how do you know who these people are? Well, find out who they are. And you can send them emails, you can send them letters. Again, Dr. Marsh had said, if you get from any of your groups, if you get an email that is a structured email, don't just send that. They do not pay attention to things that are repetitive. If it is a letter that everybody from one group is sending, they are not going to pay attention to it. It must be personalized. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Phone calls. You can call their office. And sometimes those state representatives answer their own phones. And it's surprising sometimes when you're like, oh, I didn't actually expect to get you, but now let me put my professional voice back on, right? You can call them. When you meet them, again, when I met Representative Park, he handed me his card and it has his cell phone. And he actually answers his cell phone. Office visits. We always encourage, when we're able to have counselors at the Capitol, we encourage our members to make appointments to meet with their representatives after our day is over, because they do take office visits. They want to hear from their constituents. They want to hear from their citizens. And then again, attending legislative hearings. We know how difficult it is to get out of your building. And some people just may not be able to do that. But when it's issues that are really, really important to us, it might be important to take a personal day to be able to go and attend that hearing for something that is really critical to you. We do ask if you're going to be attending a legislative hearing. We probably have a few words of wisdom and we might be able to help you if you want to speak. Certainly not mandatory. But again, as GSCA members and as GSCA, we want to make sure that we have one voice and that we're speaking for all school counselors and for all students in Georgia, right? Samuel Park referenced this. This year is an election year. And so you're going to be hearing so much of legislators. And I would imagine it's going to be very, very entertaining this year, to say the least. This is the year for you to be paying attention to who is running. Get to know who they are. What are their issues? What are their values? What's important to them? They're going to be having campaign events. Go to the campaign events and get to know those people, and and pay attention to who's there. Who are the people that are supporting those people that are running for office in your particular area? Because that is important as well, to know who is supporting that person. As because it's an election year, we need to, and we know what's been happening in Georgia. So it really is imperative as citizens that we pay attention, we get involved and know what's going on, because whatever happens in the election is going to end up affecting our profession. It's going to end up affecting our students. And I think that's one thing that, I didn't realize when I was younger, and that's why I've become so passionate about this now. Those decisions that they are making and those bills that they are writing and passing have a direct impact on what we do in our buildings and a direct impact on our children. And that is why we must all be involved. Dr. Marsh, Missy, is there anything else that y'all want to add about those points or anything else that we've been talking about? And Gayle, you're muted.
I try to be so proper and mute, but anyway, that's just me. I just to talk about legislative hearings for just a second. Yesterday was a hearing on the Senate side for one of the anti-CRT bills. And for those of you who aren't familiar, that CRT is critical race theory. And there's, like Jennifer mentioned, quite a few bills that have been dropped that are against critical race theory. And the purpose today is not to go into that or discuss it, because we could take 2 more days to do that. But typically, that what I'm seeing is that most groups who read those bills, especially folks who are involved in education or have a lot of questions about the purpose of the bill, what the bills mean, they are confusing. And the perfect example of that was yesterday at that Senate hearing on one of the anti-CRT bills. The room, I wasn't there, I watched it virtually. The room was packed. There were so many people there ready to speak out and public comment, but they didn't get to. And they didn't get to do that because the members of that committee used up the time questioning the sponsor of the bill. And the dialogue back and forth and the questions and answers and holding each other accountable and asking for explanation is what this process is about, this legislative process. And a lot of facts surfaced in the questioning of that bill. Watch it. You can go on actually the Georgia General Assembly. All these hearings are archived. You can watch on the Senate. I think it was the youth and children or children and youth. If somebody's out there and knows the exact name of that committee, throw it in the chat. You can watch it and see. All the folks that were there for public comment didn't get a chance to do that, but it was because of the question and answering of the committee members was so rigorous. And I appreciated that. So those hearings are open. Anybody can, you have to pass through security, but you can go into any of those hearings. There's a sheet of paper up on the front table. If you want to speak as a citizen, you sign your name, and if they allow public comment or if there's time, You can do that. That's how open these forums are. And for GSCA, we might be asking some of you to go and speak at hearings on behalf of the association. But get involved in that so you can learn about what's going on. And if you can't be there, then it was the Senate Committee on Education and you. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway, enough about that. The hearings are fascinating to watch and to be part of.
Dr. Marsh, did you want to add anything before we move on? No, okay. All right. So at this point, this is our contact information. If you have questions for us, take a picture of it, do whatever. And you can email us at any time. Again, like I said, if there's legislation that you're reading and you don't understand it, shoot us an email and we might, depending on how long we've had to look at it ourselves, might be able to help you with that. But again, get in touch with us for anything, okay? I'm going to stop share at this point because at this point, our agenda, we have another esteemed guest with us. But Gayle, did you want to introduce our next guest? I saw her.
Yeah. And Lisa, Erin Mason needs a screen. If you can find her, I know she's in the call somewhere. Dr. Erin Mason, who was in a former life a school counselor in Gwinnett County and then in Cobb County, a graduate of Georgia State, headed off to Chicago, worked in DePaul in their school counseling program there. She was gone way too long, but managed to find herself back to Atlanta, back to Georgia State. I met Erin years ago when we first started working advocacy together for GSCA. And she's just amazing. She's one of the strongest advocates I know, just so knowledgeable in so many areas, and researches and publishes and teaches and advocates and cheerleads and champions. And I didn't write any of this, just speaking from my heart, that Dr. Erin Mason is the bomb diggity. It is monitoring this legislation as well during this session, and is not only consulting with us, but with other groups who are monitoring, has created a sample draft letter that she is going to walk us through, going to share with us, and her words of wisdom for what we can do to move ahead in this really crazy legislative year.
And Dr. Mason's words of wisdom are endless too. One of the other things we did our specialist degree together at Georgia State a long time ago, but then when she moved back to Atlanta, I was able to snag her to be one of my supervisors in my PhD program. So I got to work with her again. Dr. Mason, I can share my screen, the letter. Tell me when you want me to share the screen.
Yeah, sure. So thank you all so much for that warm introduction. I'm always very happy and comfortable and delighted to be in the company of Georgia school counselors, because you all are my home indeed. So you all have heard a lot this morning from your GSCA advocacy team about sort of the long game and the priorities of GSCA advocacy team. And so I want to talk to you about sort of the short game that we're in right now. All of the things that they have talked about are really important, because the long game helps you in the short game. So when you have relationships with your legislators, that helps you kind of when we're in the heat of the moment, like we are with all of these particular bills. So I'm going to talk to you about this letter that I've crafted and kind of why it looks the way that it looks and how you can use it if you want to use it. But I'm also going to talk, I've shared it in the chat so that you can follow along there as well. And I also want to give a shout out. I've been talking with Gayle a lot. I've also been talking with Laura Ross and Jennifer Susko, people that are also involved in, really trying to address a lot of the issues as well. So I'm just trying to bring my skill set, which is largely about writing, and just trying to lend that to this work, and I like to be where the action is happening. So that's where I try to go, regardless of who else is there. So that's me. So thank you so much for having me on. I'm always willing to just do my part wherever I could be helpful. So one of the things that I did share in the chat earlier, and I can redo it. I think most of the people, it looks like we haven't changed too much in terms of participants. So I think it's still up there a little bit earlier is a document. This is not in any way affiliated with GSCA. This is a group called Georgia Coalition Against Classroom Censorship. But again, no affiliation with GSCA, but they have a good document that compares all of these anti-CRT bills and kind of condenses all of the bill language down, which is really helpful. So I think you can kind of see what the major provisions are in each of those bills, and it does a good kind of crosswalk. So you can, I think it's just easier to understand than trying to read through each of these individual bills. So take a look at that. That should be somewhat helpful to you. And as we are going along with these particular bills, but really you can use what I'm going to talk about as just sort of a general process for thinking about how you write to legislators in general. And, you know, those of you that have done this before, please chime in with your own tips, because certainly mine is not the way to do it. I'm just giving you some suggestions. So first and foremost, anytime that you are writing to your legislators, the main things to remember, the big do nots to do are: do not do this on work time, and do not use your work devices or your work emails. It's so important that you do this on your private time from your private devices and your private email. Because you are doing this, even though you are doing this in your role as a school counselor, you don't want any of this communication to be connected to your school accounts or devices. You are also doing this as a citizen as well. So you're kind of doing this in a dual role. But it's really important that you don't use your work email or your work devices. So that is rule number one. The other thing that's important to remember is who you're sending it to. And you see in the letter that I've got up here, kind of these top two things to keep in mind. So what you'll find with this particular letter, because in this particular session, which is a little bit unusual for us, we've got so many bills that we're concerned about. There's 4 or 5 different bills related to the sort of anti-CRT. We haven't, as Jennifer and Gayle have said, we haven't heard about anti-SBL, but you know, there seems to be some attachments, even if we look across legislation across the country where people are, legislators are connecting the two of those things. So we don't know if we'll see that here in Georgia. But because these bills are kind of coming along together at the same time, the way that I've written this particular letter for you is kind of a mix and match. So you'll be able to sort of pick the points that you want to use, but it's not specific to any particular bill. What has happened over the past week is that those of us who've been doing a little bit of grassroots work is we've been trying to take some of these points and basically modify this template for the specific bills that have been talked about during these hearings. So Senate Bill 377, which is the one that Gayle was talking about, 1080, House Bill 1084, which has a hearing today. We've tried to send out some additional emails that are specific to those. Laura, I don't know if you want to grab that 1084 link and maybe put that into the chat. So if you want to email legislators today about 1084, then we'll drop that link in the chat as well. So in terms of that point number 2 about your legislators, what you sometimes do is you want to send your specific legislator an email. And when you do that, that's where those points that your advocacy team has already made are really important. That you can use a template like this, but personalize it. So if you want to make sure that you say up front that you are a constituent, that is a loaded word because a constituent means I can vote for you or not. And so by using that word constituent in your letter, that's really an important word to use. So if you're emailing your particular senator or representative, make sure that you throw that word constituent in there. The other thing that's really kind of interesting and fun to do is look at your legislator's profile on the General Assembly website, find out things about them. Maybe they are a Georgia State grad like you. Maybe they are a dog lover like you. You know, maybe they grew up in a part of Atlanta that you grew up in. Make those kinds of personal connections. So don't just have this dry template, but really try to do some personal connecting, even in an email. Sometimes we will also send a letter like this to an entire committee. So for example, the Education and Youth Committee in the Senate is the one that was hearing about this bill 377. And so we might have wanted to send to all those committee members. So sometimes your audience is a little bit different. In the case of today and this particular letter, I think probably the best step for us is to really target your specific legislators, because that's really what I think you all have talked about today, is how to find your legislators, how to make connections with them. And I think in this particular case, with this letter that you're looking at right now, let's target our specific letters or legislators. That means your senator and your representative. So the way that I have written this particular letter, and this is all really my own language, so feel free to edit it and make it yours, but keep a couple of things in mind. Number one, legislators know nothing about school counseling. They don't know about ASCA mindsets and behaviors. They don't know about the national model. They don't even know about, Erickson psychosocial stages of development. They don't know about career development. They know none of that. They know nothing that you learned in graduate school and none of what you do day to day as a school counselor. So the language that you use, honestly, has to be dumbed down. It has to be very basic in terms of how you get your points across. So that's what I've tried to talk about here. And the points that I have tried to make, and again, you can kind of mix and match. You can take these points and use all of them, use some of them. You can add to them. I've really tried to make them very basic so that legislators read them and they identify with them. They say, okay, that makes sense to me about the fact that a child would have these social milestones they're trying to meet, these kinds of things, because these are the things that are connected to these concepts related to anti-CRT, SEL, without necessarily using all the same language that we would use as school counselors. Again, if it doesn't fit with you and the point that you're trying to make, you can certainly edit it as you see fit. But again, you kind of see how I've tried to make it concise. I've bolded that first line. You want to make it concise, succinct, kind of super easy to read, almost like, Fisher Price kind of delivery. And then at the end, one of the things I think is most powerful, and I really would encourage you to do this, and we hear this over and over again from legislators, we hear this from people who are doing policy work from some of these coalitions and other organizations that work with legislators, is tell a story. Obviously, don't use names, don't use your school name, don't use students' names, don't use family names, all those kinds of things. Keep confidentiality, but tell a story that highlights the points that you have listed prior to in the letter. Help them to understand how you have really worked to help a student who has dealt with a really difficult social emotional issue and the resources that you needed to do that. And you all know these stories. I have just given a very basic list of possibilities just to kind of get your brain going, but you all live this every day. So you know what these stories are. So give them a story, bring those points to life in a way that makes it really, really tangible. And then I've ended it with, I've already populated the social and emotional development position statement from ASCA, so they can click on that if they want to. Say thank you, and then put in your name and your address, because you're sending this to your legislator, your senator, and your representative in whose district you reside. Again, no school contact information, no names, no district information, none of that. So that's how the letter is crafted, with that sort of intention. Again, we're not targeting any particular bill here, but if you want to target a particular bill here, or at another point in time, you can kind of use this a little bit as a framework. So I hope that's helpful to you all. I've shared that link in the chat. Gayle, I have emailed it to you all as well. And if there are questions, I'm certainly willing to entertain those. Anything that you all want me to comment more on?
Dr. Mason, in the hearing yesterday, the senators on that committee, and as well as the sponsor of the bill, Senator Hatchett, said that they were getting letters. They were getting letters about this bill. And especially Senator Hatchett is becoming a more informed legislator because people are reaching out and explaining their perspectives, correcting, because he also said, and this isn't about just that bill, I'm using this as an object lesson, that he had learned some things and that he knew that his bill needed revision. And so these letters can be very informative and helpful, even if we are mad as everything about the content of whatever bill it is. When we write our letter with passion and conviction, when we provide information, that's helpful to those sponsors to make changes to the bill, as well as that public input and the questioning and the debate in those committee hearings. This is a process that when all the pieces are working together, we can move toward a better resolution. Some of the bills out there are really scary right now. And I feel like if we get involved, and I know there's a lot of grassroots efforts going on too, letting folks know, letting hear from the collective what we know and how we feel is very powerful.
Yeah, and I know I follow both of my legislators on social media. I heard back from my senator, who's actually on that Education and Youth Committee. I know she commented during the hearing. I was able to thank her on social media because someone commented about her comment during the hearing. My representative picked up my tweet about National School Counseling Week and tweeted that out, so I was able to thank her. You know, even those kind of like micro interactions are really significant. So it's just a matter of beginning that relationship if we don't have one, and then continuing to nurture it over time. But I'm also a resource to you all if I can be helpful in any particular way. Again, there are grassroots happening, as well as all the great information that you got from the team today. So get on it, folks. We got to move. I know it's a pandemic and you have 18 bajillion other things going on. This feels like one more, but good grief, this is such an interesting time, and we there's just very little time to sit down and take a breath.
And it's so important. And I think, you know, Gayle, you just mentioned about all of the moving pieces. And I think it's important to understand too, some of this legislation, though it has the names of particular legislators, those legislators didn't write it. House Bill 888 really is a version from the Heritage Foundation, which is writing legislation for all states that legislators can pick up and use. And there's another group called Frontline Policy Action that has written, you know, kind of like templates, like, you know, so we have a template of a letter that we can use in response to these templates of legislation that are being proposed all over the country. So again, it's a lot of moving pieces, and we need to make sure that we are part of all of those moving pieces, right? All right. Are there any, sorry, go ahead, Gayle.
No, I just wanted to thank Erin for, I'm going to quote her from some years back, but for who you are and what you do. That was a message that before Erin left to go to DePaul, She attended Cobb School Counselor Association, one of our recognitions, and we were able to recognize Erin before she left. And that was her message to the group. She thanked them for who they are and what they do. And I'm just flipping it right back to you, friend, and for the investment of time and energy that you're putting into guiding us through this process as well, pulling all these pieces together. So, and for taking my phone calls at all weird times of day and night.
Happy to do it.
We talked about balancing roles, right? Balancing roles and figuring out time. How do we fit it all in? Because that's a real concern. So we do hope that everyone on this call has gotten a lot of information that's really helpful. We do, kind of want to ask, are there questions that anyone has specifically? At this point, if you want to, I believe that we should be able to see if you do the little yellow raising your hand. If you want to put something in the chat, let us know. We want to answer those. And then we're going to close out with some advocacy stories. But really, the most important thing is really to hear from y'all if there's anything. All right, so S. Hall put a question in the chat. Now, unfortunately, I have to scroll back to it. I'm not the best. If anybody else is looking at the chat and can tell me, S. Hall. Okay, so I see, could you clarify on how counselors will support the applied learning portions of learning readiness competencies? Also, are the life readiness competencies meant to replace the ASCA social skills behaviors? So the life readiness competencies really are coming through the state of Georgia. And so those things are, again, we just got our state board rules stating that we are school counselors, and then along with that, these competencies. So it's certainly not going to replace anything from ASCA. Every state likes to make things their own, right? So instead of saying we're going to do every single thing that ASCA does, if there's something that Georgia says, well, wait, we can't do that because of whatever reason. So, we call it Georgifying. And that's actually a term that we heard one of our esteemed members of a very esteemed group use. Everything gets Georgified. So really, that's just our Georgification of what is promoted from ASCA for school counselors. So these are the things that we are able to make sure that we teach and that we promote within our schools as school counselors in Georgia. I hope that makes sense.
And Jennifer, it was probably, now I'm going to tell you how long I've been in this profession, but at least 20 years ago that Georgia did have our set of standards, our Georgified standards. And that was probably even before ASCA standards. And some of you have been around for a while will remember those super standards. And over years, they just kind of went away. ASCA came along, we started using their standards. And I think when I'm thinking back on Sheila's message, there is an implementation guide to go with the new board rule. I don't know if it's been released yet, but that we'll hear more from the DOE about how to use the Georgia standards. I'm guessing, however, that you guys, if you're ever thinking about, if you're implementing a model, if you're ever thinking about applying for RAMP, you will need to use the ASCA standards. So keeping a foot in both worlds will be how we survive over these next however long. But we don't know quite yet what the expectation is about how we're to use the Georgia student competencies.
Yeah. And so as Hal put again, in there, it's got demonstrate the application of reading skills, of writing skills, mathematical skills, and scientific principles and procedures. So I'm going to have to say, I'm not exactly sure about the answer to that question. Things are still being figured out. Now, I'm not teaching math and nobody wants me to teach math. I mean, really, truly, I did a PhD program and I took some really high level statistical courses and I got in them and I got out of them and I don't want to do it again. So to answer that question, I am not exactly sure, but we are going to be figuring all of those things out. And figuring out what does that mean for us too. Any other concerns or questions? All right, so if there are any questions, y'all can put something in the chat. We wanted to kind of close with advocacy stories, and some of you, if you know me, you've already heard this story. But so I'm very close friends with my state representative. I live over in Buford. I'll be honest, I can't remember the number that we have because I've had all these numbers flying around in my head. But I was at an event sponsored by our local cluster education foundation, and somebody said, "Hey, that's our state representative." And I said, "Hey, I want to go meet them." And so I did. I went and I met Representative Clark, introduced myself as a school counselor in one of the schools in that cluster. I invited him to the school right away, which, caution, always talk to your principal first before you invite anybody to your school. But it was an open invitation. I would really love for you to, to meet my students. And again, I always go with my peer leader groups. And he came out, and in fact, he and another state representative, it was kind of being a role model to him because my state representative was kind of a freshman representative. And they came in and they spoke to my 5th grade classes, and it was really, really wonderful. And then I had a small issue at my school. Somebody asked me to get some students to raise and lower the flag. And I thought, oh, one more thing. And then I thought, well, opportunity. And so I created a flag council. I got kiddos that, were somehow involved in Scouts because they get trained on raising and lowering the flag. And my state representative was a retired service member out of the Army. I asked him to come and train my flag council on raising and lowering the flag and kind of give them a lesson about all of the very specific things that you have to do when you raise a flag and you lower a flag from the United States. And so we started to develop a relationship because he would come every year, and I had him come out a couple more times. I started to invite him to our advisory council, our school counseling advisory council. And so he was able to give input. He was able to hear what we were doing from the school counseling program at our school. He started to talk about, we started talking about personal things as we got to know each other. And today I have his cell phone number. I have his email. And when I started to be concerned about this, these different series of legislation, I shot him a text and I said, hey, here are some things I'm concerned about, and here's why I'm concerned about those things. Granted, it was text, so it wasn't, another dissertation. It was a lengthy text. And he called me back a couple of days later, and we had a really long conversation about it. And he said, I'm really not familiar enough with this, Jennifer. He said, I need more information. And so we talked, and it was a really good exchange. And I'll be honest, he and I don't always agree on everything politically. But that's okay because I'm his constituent and he's going to listen to me. And he knows me to be a professional in good standing and that I do good work with kids. I think one of the great things that we can lean back on as school counselors is we can say school counselors do good work for kids. And legislators are going to say, okay, that makes sense to me. Because of that relationship that I have built with him, because we're friends, he calls me and he asks me questions and I can text him and I know that I can get a response back. Does that happen with everybody? Like, do I have that relationship with my senator from my area? No, but I'm working on that one. And I do have a relationship with my state representative. And I know that I can call him and text him and I'm going to get a response from him. Most of the time it's within the same day. He was really funny. He really apologized for taking a couple of days to get back to me. And he said, look, I understand because y'all are being inundated with all sorts of stuff right now. But it's just simple. It can be as simple as being in the same room with a person, introducing yourself and saying, hey, I want to get to know you because I work with kids and what you do in the Capitol is affecting my students. And they're going to say, okay, again, we're kind of in a good area. We're not talking about insurance. We're not talking about infrastructure. We're talking about children. And most of the time, legislators are going to say, okay, hey, I need to listen about that. So I think that, in some way, if you can figure out how to get your legislator in your school building and get them to work with your kids, that really is the best way to get in and to build that relationship. Hey, how are you? Uh-oh, somebody's not muted. and you know, I've got to say, Gayle Councillor Smith, if you don't know why people are calling her Gayle Councillor Smith, it's because she has an email that says Gayle Councillor Smith. And so that was kind of the running joke. And so people call her Gayle Councillor Smith. So Gayle Councillor Smith, do you have anything that you want to add, any stories?
I do have a quick story, and this is more about networking. When I first started going to the Capitol with Erin back in the day, I loved it. I fell in love with that space and that energy from the very first day. And I was lucky to be able to take some personal time from work to go down to the Capitol kind of regularly. And I would hang out on the floor where all the lobbyists would hang out. I didn't know a soul. Sometimes Erin was with me, sometimes she wasn't, but I didn't know a soul. And one day I'm walking up, just soaking in the energy, and I saw someone familiar, and I walked up to him, and this was Coach Herb Garrett, who was my choral teacher when I was in high school. And at that time, he was the executive director for the Georgia School Board Association. I didn't know that, but he recognized me, and we started talking. And I made friends with the lobbyist from GAE, and one of those people, Jocelyn Whitfield, I ran into her, saw her, and before I knew it, this little group was gathering there where Coach Garrett and I were talking, and he started introducing me to people. And it was from a past relationship that was decades old. To fast forward to that moment and started talking with him about school counseling. And of course, he came up through the rank and file of being a principal and a superintendent. I mean, school board, he had done it all. I had the perfect person to talk to about school counseling. And he took me under his wing and started giving me advice about how to navigate the water at the Capitol and who I needed to meet and where I needed to go. And because I knew nothing. And it was also from that I met Ben Scafferty, who at that time was the education advisor to Governor Perdue. And we had each other's phone numbers. Erin and I would just walk into his office, and he would knock papers off the chair onto the floor and say, "Hey, I'll sit down and talk." We crossed paths so many times, but you never know. I mean, the people you know might be a connection. The people you meet might be a connection, that they become friends. These relationships are authentic, especially if they know that the work you're doing is coming from a good place. So that's just my really quick story. I have others, but Coach Garrett taught me how to sing.
It's really wild how people start coming together, and you know, I mean, y'all know this. Living your life, you have people that, like, what, you know, I'm thinking of the 7 degrees or 7 whatever of Kevin Bacon, right? How everybody's kind of connected somehow. And so think about those connections and the people that you know, and how they can, you know, they can connect you to people that might need to know more about school counseling and what we do and how important our work is. So, Dr. Marsh, did you have any words? I know our time is getting to a close. Did you have?
I know. I had a quick story too, so I'll just make it super short. My very first time doing counselor at the Hill, I got to meet my representative. She happened to be there, and we got to have a conversation. And I referenced it earlier, but she goes to a little event called Alive After 5. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but Roswell every month has this fabulous event. And so I see her, and it starts in April and it goes every single month into October. And so I know in the upcoming months, I'm going to see her, and she's going to be out there talking to, you know, the Roswell community. And it's Jan Jones, who happened to have just written some legislation that has dropped recently, right? And every single time that I'm out there, she's with her family and I'm with my family, but we always say hello to each other. And it came from that very first time of doing counselors at the Capitol, right? And making that first connection. And so I can talk to her, and sometimes it's a hello, or sometimes she'll say, "Hey, I have a quick question for you." So you just never know those connections that you're going to make.
I don't know if y'all see in the chat, Dr. Mason mentioned an incident in her representative's office in Illinois and talked about eyebrow threading. You never know what kind of conversations you're going to have, because again, these are real people, and real people talk about real stuff. And quite often it's those connections and those things that really make things real. Really quickly, my state representative, one morning he was at my school for some event, and he told me that he thinks that he met the woman that he was going to marry the day before. And why he was telling me, I don't know, we were just talking. And as it turned out, he did marry her. And I went to their wedding because he said I was one of the first ones that he had ever talked to about his love for this young woman. So again, I say we're friends, and you never know what's going to develop. So I know that Dr. Hester is on again, and she wants to give our closing statements. Our advocacy team just wants to say thanks so much, everybody. I want to reiterate what Sheila McKeon from the DOE said. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. We know how difficult it is to take time out of our busy days, but we sure do appreciate everybody showing up and being a part of this. And we hope that this has inspired you to get even more involved in advocacy for what we do and for our kids. So, Dr. Hester.
Hi, thank you, Jennifer. And I'm excited. I'm inspired by everything you guys put together today. So I wanted to make sure we have this on record, how much we appreciate our advocacy team for all of the work that they did today and gathering together Representative Park and Nix and Matthew Gambill for his recording. And our DOE partners, like you said, we always want to thank them. When you guys see them or have a moment to thank them, please do so. And then also Dr. Mason, thank you for crafting this letter. I know you were working behind the scenes after we had the session last week. So thank you so very much. And they are telling the truth, you guys. I was at the session where we met with the committee to get the extra funds that they were not going to allocate to school counselors. And the representative at the end said, you guys write really nice letters. We get really mean letters, but we read your letters as school counselors. So I just want to say that everything they're saying here today is the absolute truth. We have representatives who have told us that personally, that the work of school counseling and GSCA has been very impactful in moving this profession forward. So we don't take that lightly. So I just want to close and say, advocate, advocate, advocate. Everything is here. You got the tools. So thank you all so very much. And thank you for your time today. And again, happy National School Counseling Week.
Yay. Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.